I knew very little about Second Life. I had participated in a workshop sponsored by the UT system for educators interested in the technology and potentially using it as an educational tool. I had created my own avatar, played around with it a little bit, and hadn't really done much with it since then. So I had stayed in touch with Jenny Wakefield, and through the course of staying in touch over the last couple of semesters, she and I had started talking about the possibility of using Second Life in some kind of a situation like this.
Or what in particular about Second Life was there that made you decide that it would be appropriate for this particular class?
Well, this seems like a technology that allows students to create any number of simulations. And to me, that seemed like a next step and something that I wanted to try in the educational experience for students, and allowing them to play around with a technology like this, to kind of put themselves in the position of some of the historical actors that we're talking about in our class, and create scenarios that replicate some of what these historical actors went through in the Cuban Revolution, in U.S.-Cuban relations. And so the technology through Second Life provides that simulation type of experience.
I just don't know what to do anymore. I've tried hope, I've tried change, but it seems my approval rating just keeps getting lower and lower. I need to do something big to get the American people back on my side. Something unprecedented.
This is the first time I mandated that here is a technology that we are going to use, and as a group, the students needed to figure out this technology and use this to communicate a specific message. The course was a history of the Cuban Revolution. So we spent the semester looking at the history of Cuba starting centuries ago and how the history of Cuba led up to the Cuban Revolution. Every week we would do lectures and targeted discussions based on primary and secondary document readings that the students did, looking at various issues throughout Cuban history and then leading up to the 1959 revolution and afterward. A lot of the documents that we read talked about some of the themes that began to appear in these projects.
I used that source, the Brenner article for the JFK part. Definitely helped for the Operation Mongoose and kind of leading up to JFK's motive, so that was my part.
And I used the Unused Evermore that we just discussed on Monday for a lot of it, and I also, because I wanted to find some of the latest attempts, so I did Google searches and I found an article from the UK Guardian.
This was a very good group of students, so every week we would have really lively class discussions, and they were very active in keeping up with their readings and keeping up with the class discussions and the themes of the week.
So if you had to identify maybe 3 or 4 main themes, what would those themes be?
Well, we wanted to emphasize Cuban unity, and that's pretty much what Fidel stood for with the whole revolution, so that's definitely a big one. Another one is going to be Soviet influence.
Well, I think that Raul was there too from the very beginning. Kind of shows at least the solidarity between Raul and Fidel, and how in some ways their leadership is interchangeable.
I think that this project, though, tapped into a bit of a creative side that some of them maybe even didn't know that they had. And so it allowed them to go beyond just a kind of scholarly analysis of the readings that we were doing or the primary sources that we were looking at, and to really examine them from a different angle, from an angle that allowed them to have a little bit of fun with them, and to really look at the U.S. perspective. That video came out as very satirical, and many of them said, it's kind of a satirical type of scenario, the way that the United States pursued Castro for so long. And so giving them the freedom to engage at that level, I think, was really refreshing for a lot of them.
Listen, Obama, I don't have a lot of time on this plane of existence, so I'll make this brief. I got elected because I wasn't going to take a wussy stance on communism like Carter did. However, if I was to focus all my attention on Cuba, I'd be missing the big picture. I had to cut off the head of the snake, Russia.
So you never went against Castro?
What? Of course I did. I thought of the Cuban American National Foundation, after all.
The anti-Castro group founded by exiles?
Bingo.
Other comments from the group?
This project ended up being a lot of fun. You know, I had trepidations about it at first, going, oh, the technology, whatever. But just the knowledge I think that we gained from doing the research, and then the fun we had putting the project together. And we wanted to make it kind of satirical because, well, some of the efforts were very funny and you know, just very unrealistic in the ways they tried to kill him. And we wanted to bring that out too, just the ridiculous way that their hate and anger toward this man just brought out the worst in us, and sometimes.
This is not a traditional type of school project, so many of them had never engaged in any kind of activity like this before for a grade. But once they got the hang of it and really started looking at the types of options that they had and the different types of things that they could do with a project like this, they got very excited about it. And most students commented at the end of the semester, once the projects were finished, that it was fun, that it was a great learning experience, that they feel like they were able to learn more and really understand more deeply what some of the themes that we've discussed over the course of the semester, and that they thought this was really an effective use of technology in a learning process, and many of them really preferred it to some of the traditional projects that they'd had in the past.
Did you have any concerns going into the project about using Second Life with your students?
Oh, sure. I had no idea how this was going to turn out. I thought this had a lot of potential, but I was unfamiliar enough with it and really was unfamiliar with the students and what their comfort level was going to be with something like this. So this is the kind of project that it can either crash and burn or it can be an enormous success. You know, having the support of the technology people on campus here really put a lot of my fears to rest. And then seeing the way the projects came out and seeing the way the students responded to them, I'm really very pleased with the outcome.
Workers, farmers, students, all Cubans, these are the questions we should ask ourselves. Why are we being attacked? Why have we had to meet here together again? Why are there traitors? Why is there an attempt to make the revolution fail? What accusations are being made against the revolution? Why are certain charges made against us? What ends are being sought? How should the people contend with these maneuvers and motives? How can the success of the revolution be assured? What measures are we willing to take in order to defend the revolution?
Given that the other group essentially framed the Cuban perspective, Fidel's perspective, how do you feel that that experiment or that simulation helped them to do perspective taking and looking at different viewpoints in terms of understanding the Cuban Revolution?
In that group in particular, I think that there were a lot of students who their own personal belief was somewhat anti-Castro, at least going into this class and probably certainly going into this project. So a number of them, I think, really placed themselves into a contrary position that was really opposite of what their own internal opinions happened to be. And in doing that and going through the Cuban literature and going through the Castro perspective was really, I think, gave them a lot of insight that they normally wouldn't have had. To really have to probe very deeply, to comb through the sources, to find the most salient things to use in their project, I think was a really useful exercise for them. To place themselves in Castro's shoes, to place themselves in the position of Cuba, the people of Cuba and the nation of Cuba, and understanding what the revolution meant to Cuba and what that relationship with the United States did to the people of Cuba and to the leadership of Cuba. And I think the way that the projects played out, really, they saw this as a dramatized type of scenario. I mean, by the time they got to writing scripts and putting the actual projects together, I think that they had gotten to the point where their own personal beliefs about the validity of the Castro administration, the strengths of the Cuban Revolution, the position of the United States, they were able to kind of set those aside and really approach the project from a creative and scholarly perspective that communicated a specific message that they intended to communicate, kind of separate from their own beliefs. I just think overall I'm very pleased with the way this turned out. I'm very proud of the students. They worked very hard and they did a fantastic job. And so this is something that I think I will probably keep in mind again for the future.